by Laura Resau. Chapter 2, Midnight Parties. Since I was 7, Juan has been my father. And since I met him, his shiny black braid has reached down to the small of his back, and snakes have rippled magically across his biceps. When he married Mom, she no longer had to juggle which of her friends would pick me up from school. Juan came to get me every day, always 5 minutes early, and we walked home together, hand in hand. Our phone stopped being disconnected, and we could have our pick of food at the Albertsons instead of what the food bank had in stock. Juan is in the import business. He buys goods from Mexico, bottles of tequila, pottery, baskets, shirts, and distributes them to stores around the U.S. When you mention his name, people say, Juan es buena gente. He's a good person, and he is. People trust him, and his business connections sometimes ask for personal favors, like using our fenced-in yard for a night to let immigrants rest before the next part of their journey north. Not long after Juan came to live with us, I woke up to strange sounds late one night. I padded into the kitchen where a pot of beans was simmering. The back door was wide open. I peeked outside into the darkness. Our yard was filling with people who streamed silently out of a truck. Juan shut the high wooden gate behind them and stood whispering to a man in a cowboy hat. At the back of our yard, a woman in a dress gazed at our muddy pond, a shallow puddle of sludge and leaves that shone in the moonlight. She knelt down as though she were praying, bowed her head, and drank, cupping the dirty water to her lips. The tip of her braid hung in the mud. Mom ran over, pulled her up, placed the hose in her hands. Then Mom turned on the spigot, and the woman drank and drank. At the far corner of our yard, a man with a mustache was eyeing our chicken coop. He looked around to make sure no one was watching him and didn't see me half hidden behind the back door. But I saw him. Feeling protective of our chickens, I slipped outside and headed toward the coop. The desperate look in his eyes scared me. It gave me a vague fear that he might tear a live chicken apart with his teeth and drink its blood. I hid in the shadows behind our olive tree. The man crouched down, reached his arm through the mesh, picked up an egg. He cracked it open on a rock. He held it up and let the shiny slime fall into his mouth. Then he licked the inside of the shell. I ran back inside the warm yellow light of our house and stood in the middle of the kitchen, my heart racing. What would taste really good if you were that hungry? I pulled out a brand new pack of Oreos. I darted outside toward the chicken coop. He was leaning against the olive tree. I held out the package. After a stunned moment, he took it, tore it open, offered a cookie to me. I took one and twisted it apart. He placed 3 in his mouth at once. The rest he passed out to others who had gathered. No one else pried their cookies open and licked the icing as I did, not even the kids. Mom appeared, her arms filled with boxes from our pantry. Instead of telling me to go back to bed, she handed me crinkly packages of crackers and peanuts. Pass these out, Sophie, to tide them over till the beans are ready. They politely accepted the bags from me. Gracias, señorita. Mom returned with our best blue towels and sheets, the ones only guests could use. She looked like an angel in her long white robe that trailed behind her like streamers. She distributed glasses and went around with a pitcher, pouring water like a gracious hostess. Más agua, señora? She breezed through the yard, touching women's shoulders lightly, smoothing her hands over children's hair. People lined up by the hose to wash the dust off their faces and legs and arms, and Mom made sure they each had a washcloth. It was the deepest middle of the night. No car headlights, not a sound beyond the low whispers, the light clink of glasses. A party, a secret middle of the night party. The next morning when I woke up, everyone was gone, not a trace except for a stack of clean dishes on the patio table and bright white sheets on the clothesline. They had washed their own dishes and linens, Mom told me, after I'd asked her about the people, unsure whether it had been a dream. The women had requested buckets and soap and a sponge and a dish towel, and they scrubbed the dishes and washed the sheets and towels. "Don't tell anyone about last night, Sophie," Juan warned me at breakfast. "No one," Mom added. "Not your friends, not even Jasmine." After breakfast, I looked around by the chicken coop where the man had tossed the broken eggshell. Both halves were there in the bushes. I saved them as a kind of souvenir. At first, they reminded me that that night wasn't a dream. As I got older, they reminded me of what mattered in life. We had about 5 or 6 midnight parties over the years, only in emergencies, if the coyote's other plans fell through. The coyote was the man the immigrants paid to lead them across the border. For hundreds of dollars per person, he was supposed to protect them from bandits, keep them from getting lost, show them holes in the fences to crawl through, tell them to hide when La Migra, the border patrol, came close. And finally, after their journey, which sometimes wasn't successful if La Migra captured them and sent them back, the coyote had to make sure they had a ride from the U.S. side of the border to wherever they were going, like Chicago or New York or Denver. If the coyote and his helpers had a rough journey and ended up stuck with a truckload of hungry, thirsty, tired people, they called Juan. On the night Pablo came, I couldn't help wondering, if the 7 people had survived, would they have spent the night in our yard? Pablo would have been just another scared kid clinging to his mother while I handed out glasses of water and plates of food. Mom tried to mother Pablo. That summer, she took time off her waitressing job at the cafe and tried to interest him in Play-Doh and dried pasta mosaics and potato stamps. Juan read him books in Spanish, and on his days off, brought him to bilingual story time at the library. I took him to the park, made brownies and jello with him, but none of us could eke out even a tiny smile. He swung if we put him on a swing, licked ice cream cones when we offered them, but without joy. At story hour, he clapped and stood up and sat down as commanded, but he let out none of the laughs and squeals that came naturally to the other children. One afternoon in July, while we were baking cupcakes, I discovered a pack of candles in the kitchen junk drawer. "Pablito, let's put candles in our cupcakes to celebrate when I was supposed to be born. I came out 2 months early, which is probably why I'm messed up." Somehow, long ago, my little kid's brain had pasted together pieces of overheard conversations. When Mom was a teenager, I started making her belly fat. And then my dad left. And then I was born too soon. And he came back to get us, but I was too skinny and ugly and sick. So he left. He left for good. So sometimes there was no money for cinnamon granola or sparkly heart stickers or the heating bill. Sometimes there was no one to pick me up from school on time, and there was no one to protect us from everything bad in the world. I held out the bowl of batter for Pablo to lick. You know, Pablo, today would have been my 16th birthday, July 15th. If I'd been born today, I might have turned out normal. And then, as he was licking the batter from his finger, he said something, a complete, perfect sentence in Spanish. Very softly, with his fingers still in his mouth, he said, Cumplo 6 años en julio. For a moment, I just looked, stunned, at his face smeared with chocolate batter. I tried hard to act casual so that he'd keep talking. Entonces, Pablito, you're turning 6 this month? He nodded. Bueno, we'll put candles in for you and we'll have a party for you tonight. Okay, Principito? He nodded. Sí. 9 months passed before he said another word.